what made you want to become president?
I think that, while you obviously love your own individual chapter, I think that there's something bigger within the Greek community. And with past experience that I've had, I've always been in leadership roles, and I think that one of the things that I'm good at is being a resource. And I remember talking to Ashley, who was president at the time, about it, and she talked about how being a resource for people and constantly being a liaison between whether it's like your higher administration or the president or from presidents to chapter members, and that's something that I've always been good at. Also, I think that there were a lot of things that I saw that needed to be changed in the Greek community. And obviously, while that can't all be changed overnight, I think any step in the right direction is progress. And I think that often we end up focusing on social events. And instead, I wanted to focus on things like integrating the 6 Greek councils so that people aren't aware of, such as PANL and ISB, and focusing on more prevalent issues. And I thought that if I were to get the position of president, that I'd be able to start implementing some changes in different aspects of the Greek community.
Okay. So in the beginning of your presidency, what goals did you set for yourself?
Well, in the beginning of presidency, so do you mean like when I started or through shadowing?
When you started.
In the very beginning, I sat down with the advisor and figured out like the key things that I wanted to do. And one of the, I guess I would say the 3 main things was, one of the goals was to make progress, like, improve relations between the 6 councils. And another one was that I didn't want to be seen as this scary authoritative figurehead, which I think a lot of times people have this misconception about PNL. That I wanted to be able to obviously still be a leader in the community, but still be viewed as a student and as an equal, because while I think that sometimes we'll assume that you're going to end up like, I guess, for lack of a better word, like driving your power in a negative way. And I kind of wanted to set the goal that I wanted to be seen as, as an individual member, as exec within your individual chapter, or as panel on exec. We all have responsibilities, and they're not necessarily any more important than one another. It's just that they're different. And that's something that was really important to me, because I think that being approachable is this big thing, and if people view you as this like scary figurehead, then I don't think you're really going to get anywhere. And because as on panel and exec, you are going to be, I guess, the voice of the Greek community. You can't voice opinions about what people want if they don't approach you and tell you.
Right.
And so I wanted to be seen as approachable. I think those are the 2 main things.
Okay. So then also these goals also come with a lot of decisions to make. So regarding the Greek community as a whole, what steps do you take to ensure that rules are being followed and that the members of the community stand by your decisions?
I think, again, you can't make a decision based off of what you want. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that all of our exec is made up from individuals with different chapters, with different backgrounds, they provide different perspectives. And sometimes when you want to make a decision, you have a tunnel vision about what you want. And I think that it's important, which all of our exec members do, is that you kind of take a step back, and we always think about how it's going to, why you want that decision made, but then how the other leaders in the Greek community will think, how administration will take what your decision is, because ultimately they end up knowing pretty much everything that you do, but also how the individual members are going to take your decision, because in the end, there's 10 of us, but the decisions that we make affect 165 plus women in each individual chapter of the 12 that there are. So we always try to take into consideration what everybody else wants before making a decision, because like any decision, what necessarily you want isn't always what's best for everybody else. And sometimes that's a hard concept for people to understand, but when you get into this role, you can't make a decision based off of only yourself. That wouldn't be fair to everybody else.
Right. So how do you ensure that these decisions made by all of exec are followed? Because you can't be every place and every time, all the time.
Right.
So, I guess what steps did you take to ensure that these are followed?
Honestly, I think a lot of it comes down to accountability. Like you said, you're right. You can't be everywhere. And I think also the thing is that we don't necessarily always make the rules panhellenic. More is the people who enforce it. The rulemaking a lot of times comes from FAFSA, and we try to find ways in which that we could kind of come to a common ground that will work for everybody. But I think a lot of it does rely on accountability. In the end, ultimately, every chapter will make a decision that will be best for them, and that doesn't necessarily always align with what the greater community has set. And I mean, like anything, you take an action, there's going to be repercussions. But generally speaking, I think that everyone's on the same page, and we try to create a really great environment within our president's meetings, and that they can relay all that information to the other execs. And I think that creating an open environment and not only just enforce rule, but explain why it exists and how maybe you understand why they wouldn't like it, but then justifying it with reasons that might have to do with like the safety of their women, which should ultimately be the end goal for everybody. That truly, in the end, I believe that everyone kind of ends up, for the most part, following them, because in the end, it's all about the community safety, and a lot of the decisions and rules that people don't necessarily like revolve around those. I don't know if that necessarily answers your question, but
no, yeah,
again,
it does.
you can't be everywhere, so
right.
kind of just have to rely on the other leaders in the Greek community and hope that they have the right motives, and that's why they wanted that position in the first place.
So when the houses do break these rules and don't follow the decisions, social probation seems to be the most common punishment. Are there any other forms of reprimanding houses for their actions?
You're right. I think I wouldn't necessarily even say that the most common is social probation, but I think that that's the one that everybody is aware of.
Yeah.
That you know when they can't go out to an event.
Right.
But a lot of times we like to think of things as educational. We don't like to think of it as more punishment. It's always a learning experience. And they're never just set just because we feel like it. I think a lot of other times things might happen to chapters when they don't follow through. So I know that a lot of times chapters have to have a certain amount of people at X, Y, and Z. And I wouldn't necessarily, it's not like they're put on social probation, but a lot of chapters are sometimes fine because those numbers aren't just made, like they aren't just thrown out there because we want that many people. Like there's a reason. If we set a guideline to a certain amount of people that need to be somewhere, it's because we actually expect the entire community to go, because it's clearly important. So whether it's like a hazing education, which we feel is like a problem issue within the community nationwide, if that's something that people need to go to and then they don't show up, that's really when we take that stuff seriously, because again, it kind of all comes down to safety. If you don't have that education and let people know about the issues, then they're not, if they don't know about them, they're going to continue to do them.
Right.
So I think that's probably honestly the biggest, that people just know about the social probation.
So how do you handle conflicts of interest, if there are any, of holding this position of authority over Greek life, while at the same time being a member of it?
I think like any position, that there's going to be their ups and downs. And I don't mean downs as in like parts that you don't necessarily like, but I would think of more of obstacles. Like I said earlier, that every position, whether it's as a member or exec or panhellenic exec, you all have responsibilities. But again, those responsibilities are different, and sometimes individual execs may, obviously their point is to think about their own individual chapter and the safety of those women, whereas as a member of the panhellenic council, you are disassociated, disaffiliated, and you never advocate for your chapter. And so sometimes I think that's hard for your chapter to understand, because they're so used to you being like, yay, my sorority is great, but now all of a sudden you're advocating for every chapter. And I think sometimes it's hard for them to understand, because you now think about the larger community and how the larger community can move forward, whereas maybe before you thought about just how your individual chapter could move forward, because that was your responsibility as a member. And responsibilities change. But truthfully, I think that working with individual chapter execs has been great, because, well, again, you have different responsibilities. Like, we've sat down and talked about ways that we can make sure that we don't run into conflict. Because I think no matter what situation you're facing, there always can be obstacles. And I think it's about being able to figure out a way to overcome them and surpass them before they happen.
Yeah. Greek life has received a lot of flack for partying. What else is involved with Greek life?
We can't deny the fact that we um, raise the most money. We have the highest GPA on campus. The ability to network um, with alum who come before and after you, like different individuals, because you have that bond with one another. And I think it also provides everyone with such a great opportunity to give back to your Greek community, to the Syracuse University community, but truly the larger Syracuse